And a very warm welcome back to the DAL Global Virtual Summit, leading, winning and well-being through inclusion. I'm now delighted to welcome our very special second panel of the day, entitled Embracing the Power of Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging and Leadership in the Pandemic Era. We're joined by three inspirational and seasoned diversity and inclusion leaders who I'm thrilled to welcome to our DAL Global virtual stage. Ramcess Jean Louie, Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Verizon Media. Valerie Todd, CVE, Human Resource Director at Siemens PLC. And Mira, Magecha, Chief People Officer and Diversity and Inclusion Sponsor at Just Eat. We're going to be hearing from our summit partners, all experts in their respective fields, as they share their very recent experiences, challenges and key learnings, and discuss how they're looking to a more inclusive future from a less than inclusive past. But firstly, before we get into the intrinsics of this session, I would love to hear introductions from each of you into your personal and professional backgrounds and any insights into why you are so very passionate indeed about diversity, inclusion and belonging. Ramcess, or Ram, I'm going to start with you.
Sounds good. Good morning, Layla. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me today. I enjoyed listening to the first panel and listening to all the pearls of wisdom, and looking forward to our conversation with my colleagues here. As you mentioned, my name is Jean Louie. I lead diversity and inclusion at Verizon Media. At Verizon Media, we're Yahoo, we're AOL, we're Huffington Post, TechCrunch, and Engadget. We build products for diverse consumption, and we really like to make sure that everybody comes and enjoy our products and services. In light of that, we really want to make sure that we have everyone around the table as we're building out our content and our products. So diversity and inclusion overall is something that I'm very passionate about. And the reason why I tell you a little bit about myself, I am the youngest of 8. I am born son of Haitian immigrants. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, as a son of a Haitian immigrant, sometimes you would get made fun of, you would get picked on. It was a time that was a little bit challenging for me. So in my life, I have had experiences where I haven't experienced inclusion, but in other parts of my life, I've experienced inclusion. I could honestly say inclusion is better and it is stronger. It makes people feel more confident, better about themselves, and they're able to contribute more. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks so much, Ram. Mira.
So thank you so much for inviting me on this morning. I don't even know what time of day it is. Mira Magecha. I have been. I work for Just Eat. I've been at Just Eat for about 5 years, and have been an advocate for inclusion and diversity ever since coming into the workplace. So it's a real passion of mine. I think it's really important being open, and my view of diversity and inclusion is the broader sense of that. So it's not around the 7 traits of diversity. It's actually about how do you have the intrinsic, the socioeconomic, how do you actually have different thought processes. So I think of diversity in the broader sense of it. So really excited to hear the conversation today.
Thanks so much, Mira. Couldn't agree more. It's absolutely about that holistic approach. And Valerie.
Hi, Layla. First of all, thanks to you and DAL for putting this conference together. Really, really pleased to be here. Everyone, my name is Valerie Todd. I'm the Human Resources Director for Siemens PLC. And in my spare time, I sit as a non-executive director on the board of the British Army. So I kind of do some non-exec and executive work. My passion for diversity goes back to, like Ram says, my upbringing. My parents were first-generation immigrants to the UK. Their experience was not always positive in terms of being Afro-Caribbean. And I've always felt that actually Britain can do better. We can be a better society. But people like us, people assembled today, have to champion that, have to speak out, have to continually advocate for a fairer and better society, if that's a society that we want to live in. So, and that's why I'm passionate about it, and I bring that to every walk of life, not just my career and my work, but also into my personal life as well. So, glad to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you all ever so much. Thank you all ever so much. And it's always fascinating to hear about individuals' personal life, because I think that's so relevant given the present time, obviously, that we are living in. And sharing those personal intrinsic details, I think, really does help not only others to feel that they know us better and vice versa, but also allows our respective employees within our organizations to open up and do the same, and ultimately create a feeling of belonging. So to kickstart things, I wonder whether you might be able to give an overview, each of you, and take perhaps some of the hard-hitting and uncomfortable challenges that we've obviously witnessed over the last decade, and your thoughts really when it comes to the diversity and inclusion agenda and where that's heading into our globally connected future. Ram, I'm going to start with you.
Absolutely. So it's interesting taking a look at the diversity and inclusion journey just overall. I think when I actually first got into the space, I was more focused on it called multicultural marketing and urban marketing. I think it was Chris on the previous panel that actually mentioned when you have financial stakes involved, people are a little bit more interested. Here in the States, people started recognizing that the urban markets had spending power of over $750 billion. So in light of that, how do you target that audience? How do you get to know that audience? And then over time, in addition to the urban marketing, multicultural marketing, then diversity came on board. And then it eventually grew to diversity and inclusion, and diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity. And all of it to really drive out the same thing, which is what you were talking about earlier. How do you encourage people to bring their authentic self to work each and every day? And it's interesting because that's a phrase that we often use, bringing your authentic self to work. And now in light of this pandemic, we are actually bringing work home. So how do you really make sure that people feel comfortable showing up as their whole selves, and that you build in a certain degree of organizational empathy where people realize that, it's a great thing that you're doing in terms of bringing your work into your home, but you shouldn't feel undue pressure to keep your home life outside of your workspace, because this is a challenging time for everyone. Another key observation that I've made with diversity and inclusion is that, early on, I think there was a lot of conversation with diversity regarding unconscious bias. Everyone, once you hear that a company had an issue, you would hear, well, we have to deploy unconscious bias. We have to put that into effect right away. And there's a place for unconscious bias, and it is very, very important to have that. It's based on the foundational level. But most importantly, more so than unconscious bias, conscious inclusion is really the direction that we really want to focus in, and that we really want to spearhead moving forward.
Absolutely. Conscious inclusion is so critical. And Mira, Valerie, any thoughts on your observations given this very weird time?
Yeah, I mean, the last few weeks, if it's taught us one thing, it's taught us that as human beings, we are so interconnected. Our lives are dependent on each other, and humanity is almost like an ecosystem. What happens in Korea, what happens in Italy affects us here in the UK. And we also learn from those other places. So, society is not about individuals, it's about us as a community, whether that's your local community or the wider worldwide community. But I think one of the things that certainly from an employer's perspective is that COVID has taught us is that leaders have to be adaptable and they have to be inclusive. We have to find new ways of making sure we engage with people when they are not close by or when they have to work in a different way. And we have to recognize that the world of work is going to change irreversibly. Yeah. And it's how we embrace that, and how leaders not change who they are. They don't. Leaders evolve, and it's how they evolve to become more adaptive, to understand the new context, but how they also evolve to become far more inclusive, knowing that working patterns are going to change, people's expectation of the world of work is going to change, but also the stress that people have been under will change the way people view work. So kind of think leaders are going to be at the forefront, and diversity and inclusion is at the forefront of that, it's at the heart of that agenda, because COVID has not affected us all equally. It's affected us in many different ways based on our age, our ethnicity, and leaders have to now recognise that. So I think there's a big step change that we have to make in supporting leaders to lead in a different way.
the world of work will be fundamentally different as a result of this. And actually, I see that as a potential opportunity in terms of what that means rather than a detriment. So yes, the pandemic has had its challenges and us getting through it, but actually I kind of have started looking on the other side of what this could mean, and that's where I see and start seeing some of the positives. The business hasn't evolved in 20 odd years that I've been working. I walked into a consulting gig and we were doing research on smart working and what that looks like. 20 years on, I'd say some organizations have fundamentally moved on, but we haven't really fundamentally shifted our perceptions of what and how you employ people. This pandemic means that we could be opening up a whole new raft of socioeconomic diversity, where people were educated, how that operates. Do people genuinely need to travel into work? Could we have more working parents in the workplace? What does this really mean? And genuinely, how do we transition the workplace? So to the point of leaders need to adapt and kind of embrace this change and find a way of leading through that. I think that's fundamental. And us in our people professionals, as well as in our diversity hats, actually have to help and educate the business through what that could look like and what the possibility is. And I think that possibility is an education piece that still has time to work through, and we've all got to work through it at the same time.
On that point then, Mira, if I could ask you, what lessons have we learned so far within diversity, inclusion and belonging, and the experiences that we've gained from the pandemic, and how we can utilise these learnings moving forward in a more digital and highly interconnected world?
I think it comes back to some of the comments that we've already made, which is actually we're all connected in some way. And one of the things that I've thoroughly enjoyed about people and everybody working from home is it's not this situation where some people are working from home and most people are in the office, so you're the outlier if you're not there. Actually, we've got an insight into people's lives. We've got an insight into their pets, into their children. How many conference calls have we all been on and we go, hold on one sec, my little girl, my little son, whoever, the dog's barking, the cats want to be part of the conversation. All of those things are now a real part of everybody's life. And you could be the most senior chief exec versus the most junior person who's on that call. And actually it just brings some humanity and humanness. And this is, I think, my word for the COVID, which is we're humans. And we're humans in different ways. And actually, I'm starting to really get to know my team. So personally, I've always had this challenge of this is Mira, the persona at work. This is Mira outside of work. And the two things sometimes not clash, but they don't always come together because I'm a professional at work. And therefore, my home life is my challenge and my personal stuff. Actually, I don't have an option. It's starting to blend. And as a result, I'm starting to share more about who I am, what's important to me. My team are doing exactly the same. And actually, across the business, we're just finding more and more people are sharing. And therefore, when you share more, you're also coming into, actually, you're not what I thought you were. And one of the simple examples of that it has been really funny, which is, what's the pictures? What are the posters you have around your house? What does that tell you about someone's personality? And again, you might have this image of they're going to love landscapes as an example. And actually, I've got a Superman image in my back on some of my video conferences, and people are like, never would have thought you were a Superman fan. And actually, it's all about the different diversity of thought. And again, it's my view of diversity isn't just, am I female? What's my ethnic minority, ethnic background? Where did I grow up? It's all of the pieces that bring together who I am and what challenges I see and what makes me the person I am.
And I'm sure all of you have got an HR background, but it'd be nice for people to be thinking now, HR people are human after all. There's the work you...
That's a genuine thing, actually. The number of times I'm in conversations and people go, oh, how do you actually engage a HR? It's really simple. I'm a human. And I'm a human before I'm a HR professional.
And I'm looking at Ram's background now thinking, oh, I can't quite see what's on that poster there on the wall, but I wonder what it is, and I wonder what it says about Ram's personality.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. I get that 100%. That's, I think as human beings, we're just accustomed to compartmentalizing different parts of our lives. And now that we're home, it's you have to accept, the full person in every aspect of who they are, which is great. It's a great way to kind of get to know each other.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the word there, Mira, about humanness. Something that I've heard been repeated over and over in the last few weeks is being exceedingly kind. More than ever, it's just been kind. I mean, the work pressures that you get, projects, this needs done, it needs to get done, tomorrow, but it's all about how you ask someone to do it and when you need it by, and to understand their situation rather than just get it done. And I think a greater appreciation during the last 11 or 12 weeks now about just being kind to everybody, and the way that you want to be treated is the way that you should treat everyone else, and it's a mutual respect.
It's also being kind to yourself. And that's one of the things that we've been doing a lot of work in at Just Eat around. We're in unprecedented situations. No one, as far as I'm aware, has had to homeschool in my work lifetime, homeschool, manage workloads, have possibly 2 parents at home trying to manage work, children, life, not being able to go out, not being able to have the support networks that they would usually have, be that school, be that grandparents, be that neighbours, be that childminders. All of that support network has just gone, literally disappeared overnight. So everybody is working through the same challenge. And
very good.
There is that whole piece around be kind to yourself, be kind to others, but also understand and be real with what you can achieve and when you can achieve it. So be honest about some of those aspects of going, look, I'm working and I will always be working, but actually I've got some different priorities, and that means I need to flex my day. That means I need to do things differently. I need to balance my childcare. I need to balance my mental health to be able to go for a walk in the middle of the day, because actually I feel like I need to constantly be online, and that's not good from a mental health point of view. So how do you be kind to yourself and know your own triggers? Because everyone seems to be going through the ups and downs. What's really interesting is people are going through their ups and downs at different stages at different times, and different things are triggering their ups and downs. And again, it's because we're human and we're all different, and different things spark a different reaction.
Absolutely. Valerie, how about Siemens?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I would endorse everything that Mira has just said, but we have a different dimension. We have people working from home experiencing all the things that Mira has just described, but we also have a lot of people who are still going to their normal place of work, in our factories, in our operational sites. So Siemens is a large, complex organisation that provides gas and power. So we've all continued to enjoy energy into our homes. We provide ventilators, and we provide blood monitoring equipment to the NHS. We provide transport services, transport to in London and other places. So quite complex. A lot of people have still been in their normal place of work, and that has brought additional pressures because they are, having to travel, having to do all those things, and we are equally concerned about their mental health, their safety, how they're having to isolate themselves maybe from their families and loved ones, but whilst also then trying to go to a place of work where that environment is incredibly different, where there's demarcation lines on the floor, where there's they're having to wear face coverings, etc. So it's a very, very different world, and yet they've got colleagues who are sitting at home, and we're trying to find ways to create equity between different groups of employees who are working in very different ways. And it's really causing us to maybe question the value of employment and where we place that value and how we show respect to each person, even though they are doing different roles in different ways under very different circumstances. It's how we have an equitable and fair approach, how we make everyone feel valued and feel connected still to each other. And I suppose coming out of this, we would have learned a great deal. We'd have learned a great deal about the resolve of our individuals, of our employees. Their commitment to the organisation has been phenomenal. But from a diversity perspective, we have to challenge the way we value work, I think, and think about where we place that value going forward. Typically, it's been very hierarchical. It's been based on professional qualifications. But probably for many of us, the most important people have been the bin men who collect our bins and stop us from rats running around the street. The people like who provide the ventilators that help keep people alive. It's a real time to think about where we place value in that whole ecosystem of employment. But yeah, from an HR professional perspective, a fantastic learning curve, but also from a personal perspective, it's really made me think about the value that professionals like us can bring to our organisations in terms of opening up some of that new thinking about the new normal.
Very good. And Ramcess, how about Verizon Media?
So I have to really give a lot of credit to our senior leaders, our Chief Executive Officer, Hans Vestberg, Guru Garapan. They start off every communication by saying our number one mission, our employees. We have to take care of our employees. We have to make sure they're good. And 90% of our employees are working from home. And this was a very quick pivot. We did this all like everyone else in a matter of days and just really mastered it over a couple of weeks. If we had decided that we wanted to move into this virtual universe and have people work from home, it probably would take like a couple of years of planning to put everything in place. But we were really pushed into this situation quickly. And I think, as HR professionals, sometimes we like to be, optimistic and see it as half full. That's the way I view it. What are the opportunities now, as Mira mentioned, in terms of opening doors for a broad section of diversity? What are we doing for people with disabilities in terms of people who may have had mobility issues in the past? What are we doing for people who might have taken some time off to take care of family? So now we've kind of opened the door and created an equal playing field because everyone has similar situations. And I think one of the things that's working for us is we're moving away from the golden rule, which is, treat everybody the way you like to be treated, to the platinum rule. Treat people the way they want to be treated. But in order to do that, you have to take the time to get to know who they are and what are their challenges. Is it better for them to work during the day? Are they doing homeschooling in the middle of the day? Are they checking in on their kids? Or are they checking in on their parents? I think, everyone agrees here that, we are all in this together. The reality is we're all experiencing it differently, and taking the time to understand how we're experiencing it differently and being accepting of that is really what's going to give you the competitive edge.
It's interesting to listen to the theme that you're going across what the three of you were saying there about the speed and the pace in which we've had to change, and some of the practices that we think about in our role as HR people, and then you plan it out and the length of time it's going to take, and it will be a big project and it'll take 6 months or 1 year and we'll implement it next year. And then we have a big retailer like Tesco in the UK who say that they've changed more in the last 6 weeks faster than they've changed in the last 10 years. So they've just have to decide overnight that we're going to do this and change it tomorrow, and not take 6 months or 1 year to do it. We need to do it now.
And actually, I can give you a similar example. So last year, we planned a smart working pilot to go, what does smart working mean for our teams? And we did a country. So we used a particular country, Australia and New Zealand, and we used a global function to understand, what does smart working mean for us? Does that mean that people want to work flexibly? So they just want to start earlier, finish earlier, later, whatever. What does that mean? And what we did from the pilot was just get an understanding of what it means for our individuals, because it's not the same for everyone. So we wanted to get a bit of a view before we rolled it out. We rolled it out earlier this year to the whole business, going, these are the lessons learned. This is what smart working means. These are some lessons for leaders, etc. Within about literally 3 weeks of rolling that out, we didn't have a choice. We went straight to this world where everybody is working smartly, and smartly for us is working from home, but actually it's with the childcare, with all of that stuff. So to your point of actually when the need comes, you can rapidly put something in place, whereas previously we were doing it in a planned, methodical approach. Sometimes you just have to go with the lessons learned as you go through that. And to Valerie's point, one of the things that I think society has changed their view on is potentially who is valuable. So we've gone from, hey, it's all about the high earning CEOs. That's where we've got the credit. That's where, you know, we've got huge respect for what these people do out there. Actually, I think that's fundamentally shifted. I've got friends, family who go, oh my God, I could never be a teacher. Teachers should be paid more. Nurses, doctors should be paid more. Delivery drivers, where were they in your list of key workers? Probably not very high. Actually, in the UK, I know factually, they are key workers because they're the ones who are running and getting all your things, a bit like the bin men and women who are working and getting all the services done. But actually, in the pecking order prior to COVID, delivery drivers weren't really critical. They weren't thought of as being critical. I'm hoping that this means that everybody is starting to think about who is important, and everybody has a part to play in society. And it's not just about how much they earn, where they come from, what their educational background is, etc. Because some of these delivery drivers are highly, highly educated, but that's what they're choosing to do right now.
Yeah, and so are a lot of mums at home who are doing all the home teaching.
Yeah.
So put a salary on that job.
Yeah, the mums and dads indeed. And it's great to see actually that the media has been fantastic in portraying all different types of individuals, like you said there, Mira. From what have formerly been perhaps lowly bin men and women, actually being champions of society, which I think is excellent. And talking of the media, there has of course been some very worrying statistics, including huge differentials between diversity groups brought about by this pandemic. And clearly, as I think we touched on before, these are having a greater impact within certain socioeconomic groups and certain facets, normally segments of diversity, than others. I'd be really curious to hear your take on this in specific and some of the observations that we are seeing. Valerie, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, COVID-19 took us all by surprise, and I don't think that political leaders were caught any less by surprise than anybody else. And the research and the analysis that needed to be in place to understand the differential impact that COVID would have on different groups, whether they be Black and minority ethnic groups, age, people with medical conditions, people with obesity, all these different groups, I think probably wasn't there and still isn't in place. And I think what we're still trying to do is recognise that there is no easy fix this or easy answer. I think what it does do, though, and I think this is really important, it does really make important the need for diversity to remain on the agenda and to remain on the top of the agenda as a question that people ask themselves, whether they're dealing with government policy, whether they're dealing with local business strategy. Diversity needs to be high on the agenda, because had it been, we may have been a little further ahead of the curve on how this differential impact was going to play out. I think one of the things, though, that we should embrace is the advancement in technology. So one of the things that I'm certainly reassured by as a Black woman who may be differentially impacted and somebody who's getting older is that across the world, through technology, research bodies are working together remotely to actually try and find a solution. And I think technology is going to drive big changes going forward. And as Mira's already said, technology has accelerated over the last 8 weeks, where 8 weeks ago we would never have had a conference like this. We would probably still be trying to travel in order to meet, but now we're meeting using Teams and Zoom and all those kind of great technologies that have appeared out of nowhere. So yes, there is a differential impact. D&I is critical, and the focus on D&I is critical to understanding why that is. But let's use our intellect, our knowledge, our technology to try and find solutions quickly.
Absolutely. I concur with the fact that technology will, hopefully be, one of the big facets to being our route out of this. But certainly in the UK, and Ramcess, I'd love to hear your take on this as well over across the pond in the States. But some of the saddening figures that I've seen, and actually one of our virtual DAL webinars last week, we had a health worker on who was talking about the impact within BAME, just taking one of those facets of diversity. And actually in the UK, 6 in 10 of UK health workers who are killed by COVID-19 fit within that BAME category, which really concerned me, especially given the fact that actually, those within the BAME arena in the UK make up, I think it's about 13% of the population. So clearly there's a marked differential there, and something is not quite right. Ram, is there anything that you've seen or observed specifically over across the pond in the States, and any kind of breaking headlines in terms of statistics around what we've seen here in the UK?
Well, I think you captured it well. The data that you shared is consistent with what you find here in the States, but I do think it's important to talk about it. I think oftentimes, even being in the media, we share, well, you don't want to consume too much news. You want to protect your mental health. There's a place to put it. You know where to go find the news. But I think there is also a time to have that discussion, to actually say, all right, what the data tells us. We know that African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans are dying at a faster rate. We know that Asians are being more the target of discrimination and hate crimes. We know that, people who are struggling or who have challenges with mental health, this is more of a challenging time for them. We know that our seniors and our senior veterans, they're being impacted as well. We know that we spend a lot of time saying that, washing your hands is one way to help. We're a global organization. When you take a look around the globe, maybe running water is not an option for everyone. We look at some of the solutions that we talk about. Let's bring in drive-in testing. Not everyone drives a car. So even the solutions that we're coming up with may not really be able to address all of the different demographics. And I think it's important to be aware of that. And the reason why is, we're talking about inclusive leadership and the importance of inclusive leadership. We need all of our leaders to know that members of your team come from all of these different demographics. So not only are they, balancing home life, work life, homeschooling, taking care of parents and everything else, they're also dealing with some statistics and some data that tells them they may be in the front line, or their loved ones may be in the front lines. So, and when you have a loved one that's in the front line, that means you're in the front line as well. You have to be mindful of what everybody's going through, and how do you support these folks from a mental health perspective? How do we really make sure that we give them the tools they need in order to know that they are valued and that they are supported?
Absolutely. And whilst we are benefiting from the humanness that we talk about, and the fact that there's lots of similarities between us, actually we must, as you say there, Ram, be aware of those differences so that we can ensure, and organisations can ensure, they put that extra support and care in where necessary for those specifically vulnerable groups. And finally, Mira, have you any thoughts before we move on?
I think just following on from Ram's view, it's actually really important that the personal circumstances. So we've been doing a lot of follow-up in terms of, do people have any symptoms? Do they, and what are we doing as a result? Have they been in contact? And this was very much early on in terms of when we shut down offices, etc. But actually, it's not just you as an employee. What's going on for your family members? Who has been affected by what's happening? And again, being conscious of, as an organization, we haven't furloughed anyone. However, what's happening in their partners' lives, what's happening in their family lives, have they been furloughed? What impact does that have? We had an amazing talk by someone who did contract positive, who was tested positive for COVID, and he came out of it, and he wanted to share his journey with the whole of our organization. So we set up a conference basically for him to come and talk, and people to ask questions and really share the journey that he's been on, so that it could potentially help others going through their situations, which may not be them personally, but it's what's going on for their family, and just having that network. And again, it's coming back to, working from home or working from a different location to what you're usually working from, how can we continue to stay connected? How do you still provide the support? And we talk about leadership, but I'm not necessarily talking about senior leadership. I'm talking about all managers having the tools to lead and support their teams through any of this, and just being that check-in and just pausing and going, hey, how are you doing? And not just as you would in a corridor and go, hey, how are you? And you've already gone past, you weren't actually interested in that response. It's actually just genuinely putting a check-in call because you're genuinely concerned about someone's welfare.
Thank you, Mira. Ramcess, people are loving the platinum rule. I can see lots of comments coming up about the platinum rule, so that may be a big takeaway from today's meeting. But going to our last question here, how can we be more consciously inclusive, and why is it critical for us to achieve buy-in from leadership and across all functions of the C-suite?
I think
one thought, if that's okay. Sorry to interrupt there, Ram. Just conscious of time because we want to answer some of the questions. So a brief thought from you each would be wonderful.
Sure, that's a great question in terms of what conscious inclusion is and how you really can leverage it. At the end of the day, we want to encourage people to bring their authentic self to work each and every day in every interaction. So we need to make sure that we give them the tools where they feel comfortable doing that and kind of sharing who they are.
Yeah,
thank you.
Leaders who aren't consciously inclusive are morally redundant and probably shouldn't be in organizations anymore. There is no hiding place for leaders who don't get it.
Oh my God, I don't follow either of those two. Agree.
I concur.
To kind of help and support leaders through that, because I think the world of work has changed. And I think as professionals, we have to give the business tools to help them through that as well.
Very good.
Thanks ever so much, all of you. And we have got a couple of live questions. We have a plethora, but we have just 2 here. So apologies in advance for those that haven't had their questions answered, but don't worry at all. Our wonderful speakers will be staying during the networking break. They'll be on the live chat and the summit. So if you've got any questions, do feel free to ask then. But first, we've got a question here from Alison Green in the UK and also in the States to our friends over the pond. During this pandemic, women are doing more caring and homeschooling than men. Are they more likely to be furloughed and lose their jobs? How do we ensure this change is a positive one for both men and women?
That's a great question. What we're doing is we're being very mindful that that's the case, and we've been having that conversation internally within the organization in terms of the extra burden that women might be feeling. But what we've done was we've had a series of listening town halls where we really wanted to kind of get some perspective from different groups. So we know that, working mothers being able to balance all of these things require more support, and how can we support them? At the same time, we're also looking at single people who might have been quarantined and living by themselves over the period of 2 months, which is a tremendous amount of time. So again, we're all in it together, but we're experiencing it differently. How do we support people the way that they need to be supported?
Good. Another question. Oh, sorry, on you go, Valerie.
I was just going to endorse what Ram has said, but in addition, a couple of points. We've been accepting that there's going to be lower productivity from people who are working from home and homeschooling. So we accept lower productivity levels and complete flexibility in terms of working hours. So just to help them make that adjustment.
And we've actually seen more of our men in terms of our town halls and getting the feedback. We're actually seeing the men who would traditionally be at work and in the office, they're actually enjoying the time with the family and spending time with the kids. And actually, because they're seeing the burden on traditionally the wife, the partner taking on that, they're actually more conscious of it. So they're actually saying, I'm going to take 2 hours in the middle of the day to do some homeschooling and provide that flex. And so we're doing exactly the same stuff.
Interesting. Another question here from E. King, Valerie, is asking, you spoke about step change in leadership. How have you been preparing your leaders for this step change?
Good question. So one of the things that we've just done at Siemens, the HR community has been leading this in the UK, is something called a #New Normal, where we're holding what we're calling ideation sessions. And staff actually join a Teams call, and we use a tool where people can just throw in their ideas about what the future needs to look like. That's presented to leaders. Leaders evaluate that and really start to think about what changes need to be made. The changes are, I mean, we've had hundreds of ideas, and some of them are absolutely amazing, things we wouldn't have thought of, and each one is being taken seriously. We may not be able to carry all of them forward, but it's really meaning that we have to think about how we train people, how we develop people, how we recruit, how we structure work, where we work from, everything. And the leaders are actually taking that on board, and it's reflecting the way they think about the future of the company. So those are the kind of things that we're doing. But the important thing is we're hearing everyone's voice. Everyone has a good idea, and we really want to take all those ideas on board.
Super. I mean, we've been guilty, or certainly I've been guilty over the years. And in HR, we've been always great about coming up with names for the next new initiative. And of course, we're hearing a lot now about the new normal. But what I would like to know, is it the better new normal, or is it the new better normal? I mean, what is it? Because we're certainly not going back to the way it was.
I think the thing that we've got to remember is this situation, and again, working from home doesn't work for everyone. And so coming back to the point of everyone is human and has different needs, wants, desires, we can't accept this is the new normal for everyone, because this doesn't, to the point that we made, which is because of our demographics, we have a number of people who are in single studio flats and live on their own. This is not fun for them. This is actually super isolating. It's not good for their mental health. And so we're starting to look a bit like the guys have already said, in terms of what does that new normal look like? And it will be different for others. And so how do you create this flexible approach, but at the same time, ensure it works for everybody, both the individual and the business?
No,
and I think that's the challenge for the people profession going forward.
Right. We're interested in looking forward. We're not interested in going backward. We want to help define what the new normal looks like.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Leila, I think it's time to wrap up.
Very well said indeed. And thank you all very, very much for being part of this panel. Hope everyone who's been listening has thoroughly enjoyed it as much as Campbell and myself have.